That's nasty.
What is going on, guys? It is your boy, Chuck Nasty. You know what day it is. It is Tuesday, the day that we drop all of your waiver wire pickups so you can get the players that you need by 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm going to go over some quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and a couple tight ends that you need to pick up this week as a part of your fantasy roster to take you to the promised land. First and foremost, I feel like I maybe need to put a disclaimer out. Had a couple of people say some negative things about some advice that I gave them when I specifically said last week there are not great options for defenses. You know, if you give me a pick of two teams to choose, I'm going to give you the one that has the higher probability of having a good game, whether that's a good matchup, combination of what the line looks like with the Vegas over-under. If you're going to get upset when I pick wrong, if I pick 5 out of 6 of them right and I get one of them wrong, maybe fantasy football isn't the sport for you. But I'm just going to put this out there anyways. Public disclaimer, I'm not always right. I don't have tea leaves that indicate which players are going to score more points. But what I do every single week is come through the data. I go over the probabilities of which team has a better matchup, and if you ran a simulation on how many times this team would be better than another team, it's going to work more often than it isn't. But if you don't feel comfortable with me potentially being wrong occasionally, then maybe you should find something else to do, like badminton, where people aren't wrong. So just putting that out there. Also, don't talk smack about me if you're asking for advice on a weekly basis, because I will eventually get something wrong. If any of you guys have those fantasy football crystal balls, I'm in dire need of one because I was wrong on a couple of picks last week and cost some poor souls their potential matchups on their not already very good teams. So anyways, let's get into it. Quarterbacks for options to pick up this week off of the waiver wire. If you've been watching this on every Tuesday night, you will know that I've been talking about Jacoby Brissett with the Colts for a while. He's still under 50% owned, 48% on Yahoo. And there's a ton of people that actually dropped him because of his prior bad week in week 5 against the Chiefs, where their D did almost all of the work. Well, obviously, as you saw this Sunday, Brissett came back with a vengeance and threw 4 touchdowns, over the Texans, crossed the 20-point fantasy week mark. He's had multiple passing touchdowns in every single game except for one. And now he gets my unfortunate rest in peace Denver Broncos this week. I believe it is actually not going to be a good game. Surprise, surprise. But if you watched last Thursday night game, that's not a surprise for you. Anyways, first and foremost, moment of silence for my boy, Emmanuel Sanders, who's no longer with us. Best of luck in your endeavors, brother. Enjoy the warm climate that is California, San Francisco 49ers. He's got a chance to get another ring, and I hope he does. That man deserves it more than anybody else. But I will be playing my world's smallest violin over here in the meantime, because he was one of the most humble yet talented veterans that we have on our team, or had, I should say, past tense. Moving on. Now that we're done with the tribute. Sam Darnold is another hot pickup this week. I picked him up in my high stakes league. He's 33% owned on Yahoo, and he had a bad week against the Patriots defense. Gee, I wonder why. It's because the Patriots D is freaking great, okay? Obviously, he had a brutal showing. He was 13 for 32 passes for 86 yards and no touchdowns with 4 picks. But he has good matchups coming up, all right? He plays the Jaguars next week, which is a good matchup. He then plays the Miami Dolphins twice. The Giants, the Redskins, the Raiders, the Bengals, all in just his next 6 games. So if you're playing matchup-based quarterback play on a weekly basis, or you're just looking at to stream for that given week, Darnold's probably got the best matchup you could possibly have. So something to consider if you're a Matt Ryan owner. Obviously, he went down with an ankle injury. Not sure if he's going to be back this week. Consider plugging in Sam Darnold. Ryan Tannehill is another option. Tennessee Titans, 5% owned on Yahoo. Obviously, this was his first official start after they benched Marcus, and he came out, threw for 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick to beat the Chargers. It actually looked like he was somewhat competent running that offense. I mean, they play the Buccaneers. I don't see why he couldn't put up some more points. Definitely not somebody that you want to burn a waiver on if you absolutely need somebody. You could probably just pick him up in free agency tomorrow, but just something to consider. Daniel Jones, if you are in a competent league, he's probably already gone, but he's only 35% owned on Yahoo. He had a great first week where he put up like well over 30 fantasy points, had a couple rushing touchdowns, a couple passing touchdowns, and then hasn't really had a great showing since, but he's also been missing the best running back in the NFL in Saquon, missing Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard's been out, and the last couple games he hasn't had a great week, but plays against the Lions might be a decent streaming option this week. Kirk Cousins just had his way with that Detroit Lions secondary. 337 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. So if you got to stream somebody, just somebody to consider. Running backs? How about Chase Edmonds? He's gone in all of my leagues already. 48% owned on Yahoo. But David Johnson started this game, and this was a strange one. He started this game and got 1 carry for 2 yards and then didn't play another snap. So I have a feeling that the Cardinals didn't actually have any intention of playing David Johnson this week, but realized that they didn't really have anybody else there. And then they were like, oh, hey, Chase Edmonds, take all the volume. Had a great game, 126 yards on 27 carries, 3 touchdowns through the air. Not through the air, totally. He had 1 through the air, total touchdowns. He's probably going to be one of the hottest waiver wire ads this week, I would imagine. If he's not gone and already in any of your leagues already, you need to grab him. No saying how long David Johnson's going to be out, but just something to consider. Top priority ad this week. Second to that would be Ty Johnson, Detroit Lions. 1% owned on Yahoo. Means he's available in 99% of your leagues. Even in my highest buy-in, most competitive leagues, Ty Johnson is not owned. So probably available on your league. Carry on. I'm pretty sure it's breaking news, actually, within like the last hour or two that he was being moved to IR with intention to return. So that buys him at least 6-8 weeks, potentially. I mean, who's to say that Carry On even comes back? I didn't think it was that bad that he was going to go on IR, but that's not the case. So definitely somebody, who he was the primary backup to Carry On. He had a pretty good week so far. I mean, he had he caught 4 targets for 28 yards. He carried the ball 10 times for 29 yards. So it's promising to see him get work in the passing game as well as the running game. Just, straight carries don't really help any of us in PPR leagues, but just something to consider. Mark Walton, Miami Dolphins, 23% owned on Yahoo. I'm pretty sure that the Dolphins are just going to continue to showcase Mark Walton until they can get somebody to finally buy on Kenyon Drake. So he had 14 carries for 66 yards. He's got another back there, Kalen Ballage, that's getting some of the goal line work. And it is a really bad team, so I'm not sure how much stock you want to put in Mark Walton and the Dolphins. But something to consider. He's probably available in most leagues and could get a decent chunk of the work. Darrell Henderson, Los Angeles Rams, 33% owned. Gurley came back, actually, and had a pretty good week, but Henderson still got some play. 11 carries, 31 yards. Added a reception on there as well on his single target. The big positive for Darrell Henderson here, or Darrell, I don't know, it makes me think of that Key and Peele episode. Hey, Ron. Sorry. I don't know, how much value Darrell is going to have on his own, or Darryl, Dimebag Darryl. I don't know how much value he's going to have on his own, but if Gurley goes down, I mean, he's in for an immediate shoe-in for workload. So you've seen what they've done with Gurley's workload so far this season. Would definitely be a safety net stash, or you're looking for upside if Gurley ends up not playing in a game, which definitely could happen. Benny Snell, Pittsburgh Steelers, 5% owned. I believe there was one of one of you gentlemen was asking in the comments whether I thought Benny Snell was worth a pickup or not, and I think that might have been prior to Jalen Samuels being ruled out for an extended period of time. So he might be more of an ad now, but he's still going to be one of those precautionary ads should anything happen to James Conner. I don't know that he's going to have a ton of standalone value by himself. But, when Conner was sidelined with that quad injury, Benny Snell had like 17 carries for 75 yards, and then I got a reception for 14 yards too. So pretty much, now that the Steelers are coming off bye, and they're in a situation where Conner could be a bit more healthy than he has previously. I don't know that Snell's going to have a ton of value, but just something to keep in mind. Getting to some wide receivers to add this week. Corey Davis, my dude. Now this, I don't know why I said my dude. He's not one of my dudes at all. As a matter of fact, I don't think I might have drafted Corey Davis one time. Hang on a second. Dog's chirping over here with his collar. So, 41% owned on Yahoo, and when Tannehill gave the Titans a bit of life there, he was throwing the ball downfield, and Corey Davis seemed to be his first look. So he saw 7 targets, catching 6 for 80 yards and a touchdown. My freaking dog, man. I think that it would be a good deal if he's going to be the primary look there, but we will see where that goes. He's the top wide receiver ad this week. Kenny Stills, Houston Texans, 12% owned. Now, Will Fuller, who I happened to trade like 2 days or a day before this happened, left with a hamstring issue. He's had hamstring issues for a long time, and he's always probably one of the most injury-prone wide receivers. Boomer bust, you've seen it. He can go from catching 4 touchdowns on a given day to 0 and not being productive at all, or he can just be injured for multiple weeks at a time. So, maybe Kenny has an opportunity to come in there and actually do something. Posted 4 receptions for 105 yards on 5 targets, but more importantly, played 94% of the snaps. All right, so snap share is very important here because he outsnapped Kiki QT, would be his primary competition for targets. So something to consider. A.J. Brown, Tennessee Titans, was another deal based on Tannehill starting. Obviously, Marcus isn't getting a ton of points for his wide receivers right now. But, he had the most targets on the team with 8. And he caught, 64 yards. It's promising. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's promising. So it's one of those deals where if you got a wide receiver that's not really doing anything, or you got Deontay Johnson or somebody like that that's just coming off bye, you're not confident it's going to do anything when he comes back, grab A.J. Brown. There's some upside with Tannehill at quarterback. Philip Dorsett is somebody that is probably owned in a ton of competent leagues, but he's only 43% owned on Yahoo. So available in 57% of your leagues. And he had a pretty good Monday night showing. I mean, he caught a touchdown like right away. And if he can stay healthy in that offense. Now, they did trade for Mohamed Sanu, but luckily that's not really going to affect him as much as it will Julian Edelman. I have a feeling that Belichick has probably looked at some Mohamed Sanu tape and wants to play a bigger body in the slot or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to see how that shakes out, but I don't think that Dorsett on that outside is going to be in for as much competition. So that could be good. Auden Tate, Cincinnati Bengals, is 22% owned on Yahoo. This is a guy that I picked up a couple weeks ago. I've talked about him a couple of times. This is one of those deals where as long as A.J. Green stays out, that's when Auden's going to have a decent game. I mean, they have to throw it to somebody. They're almost always trailing. And, he had some pretty crazy good catches. Like, he just looks like he's a talented wide receiver. There's some rumors that A.J. Green is going to potentially get traded. So that would open up some more opportunities for Auden. And, he's going to be worthwhile as long as A.J. Green is sitting. And my initial thoughts was that A.J. Green was going to be back like the last week of September. So for him to continue to sit out just makes me more confident in adding somebody like Auden Tate. You could add Devontae Parker this week as well. Miami Dolphins, 41% owned. I personally try to avoid all of my shares of Miami Dolphins players. I don't really care if you're, posting, 12, 13, 14 points in fantasy on a weekly basis. too volatile for me, but, he had 10 targets against the Bills and had 55 yards and a touchdown. So PPR league, deep league, you really need a wide receiver, and he's out there, worth an ad. But, I've tried to limit my shares of Miami Dolphins players. And then Preston Williams, Miami Dolphins, same deal. He had a good week as well. 6 of 8 targets were caught for 82 yards. And, he continues to get a decent chunk of targets. Dolphins are obviously going to be trailing a ton, so it's going to be worth it. I'll give you a couple of other guys to add. Zach Pascal, Indianapolis Colts, 37% owned on Yahoo. Now, here's the deal. I don't really know that you want to add Pascal. He had a good game, but it doesn't really seem like he's going to be a primary target. It just feels like Russian roulette to me. There's so many different people that can catch balls here, including, Pascal, T.Y., both the tight ends. A lot of stuff going on. So somebody else to potentially add for you. But, Paris Campbell sat. He had 6 receptions for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a really solid week. I'm not that confident that he can do it every single week. But it's really going to depend, I guess, on how much Jacoby Brissett will look outside of T.Y. Hilton for his targets, because it seems like T.Y. is the only constant in that offense. A couple other guys to add. Danny Amendola, Detroit Lions. He's one of those guys that appears on the fantasy radar as like a little blip and then kind of disappears again. But, 8 for 105 yards on 11 targets. He's had a couple big games, but unless you absolutely need a wide receiver, I wouldn't be adding Danny Amendola. And then N'Keal Harry, if you haven't added him already, he hasn't returned from IR yet, but he's only 12% owned on Yahoo, and he's been on IR since like August, some sort of an ankle issue. High round draft pick of the Patriots this year. And, he can't actually return, I don't think, for like 2 more weeks. 2 or maybe 3 more weeks. So he's worth a speculative ad for his return when he actually comes back. But given the injury history that's going on over there, it might be a good ad there. Couple tight ends before we end the stream here. My dog is going absolutely batshit crazy in the background, chewing on something. The Eagles, Dallas Goedert. He had a pretty good line. I mean, he had 5 for 48 the week prior. This week, 4 for 69 and a touchdown. He's a pretty talented wide receiver. If you haven't heard of Dallas Goedert, you're probably not paying attention to football that much. But, he hasn't been super fantasy relevant because of Ertz. And I'll give you one other guy to add here. Darren Fells, Houston Texans, 29% owned. He only saw 2 targets against the Colts, had 27 yards on 2 targets. And he's had a couple good weeks. So, that's all I got for you guys today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, the bell for future notifications on when I'm going to drop a video. And, good luck this week.